Hi there. My name's Dr. Jennifer Posa, and I'm an organizational psychologist. I've spent the last 3 decades of my career working within some of the highest performing organizations around the globe. Mayo Clinic, Johnson & Johnson, and most recently was honored to serve as the first Chief Wellbeing Officer at the Central Intelligence Agency. As we celebrate Women's History Month, I wanted to bring to you the experience of speaking with some of the highest performing leaders that I've had the privilege of working with throughout my career. I've had discussions with them and asked if I could share those discussions with you here on the social media platform so that you could hear their thoughts around advice they might give to an individual who's navigating this complex environment and shaping their own leadership journey. I hope you enjoy the discussions. Hi, Sheronda. How are you?
Good morning, Jennifer. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. It is so good to see you. I'm really excited to have this conversation because, as most people know, during the month of March, we are talking about women leaders in honor of Women's History Month. And before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about you and make sure that the audience knows who you are. I certainly know you and was blessed to have the opportunity to work with you when you were the director of talent at the agency. But if you don't mind, could you share a little bit more about yourself professionally, personally, with everybody who's listening?
Sure. And thank you for this opportunity, Jennifer. And I will reiterate or iterate that I was blessed to work with you as well. I had an amazing career at CIA, a full 35 years right out of college. Started in analysis, imagery analysis, then transitioned into resource management. And from there, started taking on large roles such as running the motor pool, something I never thought that I would do, and I will speak to later. I actually ran recruitment for the Director of Support and later for the agency, and then started stepping into really large roles to include running administrative services for the organization, serving, as I mentioned, as the Director of Recruitment for CIA, and concluding my career as the Director of Talent for CIA. And what was fascinating was just the opportunity to grow and develop throughout the time that I was there. Currently, I am a career coach, and as well as an executive and leadership coach. I took a coaching certification while at the agency, and I loved it. And I truly found that what I value and what I love is giving back to others and the investment in others. So I am now, again, in my sweet spot in retirement, in providing coaching services, particularly to those that are in college, whether they're freshmen or about to graduate, and just helping them think about what success looks like for them.
Oh my gosh, you're like the perfect person to have on the call. And Sharonda, did you see my door open behind me when you were chatting?
I did not.
Oh, you did not. Okay. Well, just to let you know, I have a four-legged friend here that decided that, he wanted to be in on the discussion with us today too. So if you
Oh,
see
that's
a little
beautiful.
movement in the background, it's the four-legged.
That's beautiful.
We're in real life here. So, you are truly the perfect person to have in a conversation about the question I want to ask you, which is, what advice would you give for individuals navigating what I think is a pretty complex environment these days, based on your experience and your vast experience, but even just your experience in talent management, recruitment? I mean, I think women out there, who are really looking for really strong guidance around what they should do to manage their career and life aspirations. And then specifically, if you have any comments, obviously, about how your well-being really plays into that. I would love to hear that.
Yes, of course. As you can imagine, being in an organization for 35 years, it is a learning environment. And taking the opportunity to be a learner was important. And when I reflect back over my leadership journey, and as they say, hindsight is 2020, I realized there were so many points in my career when I never felt confident. And typically it was often when I was stepping into new roles and new responsibilities that I never felt that I was prepared for. I mentioned the motor pool earlier. That was actually one of them. I will say, although there was a feeling of fear and it was scary, those assignments actually became my biggest growth opportunities and paved the way for the leader that I became in the organization. So, the first thing that I will offer is say yes. Sometimes, even before you feel like you're fully prepared to step into a role, to take on a specific project. And I had to realize that oftentimes my managers, my mentors, and or sponsors would encourage me to take on roles and responsibilities that I did not feel like I could do. There were numerous in which I felt like I did not have the credentials, nor did I feel like I had every answer when in the role. But
Mm.
just taking the opportunity and taking the risk and being open to learn, as I highlighted earlier, and also understanding that failure actually brings growth, but it also allows for resilience. And I think I underscored earlier that I served at the motor pool. Uh, and that was pretty early in my career. I was someone who, and I still can't change a tire on a car. So just imagine trying to run a motor pool of about 100 people who were focused on the maintenance of the agency vehicles, the transport of our seniors, and the end-to-end services rendered by most motor pools. And I will say it is one of my most rewarding opportunities. And it just taught me so much about leadership and taking care of people, but also being willing to step out and take a risk and allow myself to grow from that.
Wow. So people, you're kind of, if I can summarize, people believed in your own abilities before you believed that you had those skills yourselves or the ability to grow in that direction. But then
Yes.
clearly based on your 35 years of career there, as well as where you landed, it's not like you didn't do well in these positions. You really did need someone to actually push you to grow and try something new and take those risks. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes. And what I found as I matured and I stepped into much larger roles, we, as a leader, oftentimes if you step back and you look at individuals from the balcony, and obviously we see their performance, but we also see their potential.
Yep.
And we, when we're in specific roles, we can't see our potential. What we see is how we're performing. But it takes those others around us to push us and help us understand what we're fully capable of.
Oh, yeah. Couldn't agree more. That's awesome. So, any other advice that you want to share?
Sure. So, two other points I want to highlight. And again, as I mentioned, hindsight is 2020. The second thing that I'll highlight is know thyself. I truly believe and really came to learn that we are who we are because of our life experiences. And we are shaped by life events, both the good and the bad. And that can often impact how we show up as leaders. And to be an effective leader, we want to create a positive, engaged work environment and leave others better than when they initially came in contact with us.
Mm.
And I truly believe that's really shaped by how we show up, as well as our attitude and our approach with others. And that really factors into why I am coaching. I truly believe in working with others to address the root cause within others as it relates to their why. Why do I do what I do? Why do I show up the way that I do?
Mm.
And I will use myself as an example. In going through my coaching certification class, we had to be coached by others in the class. So the example that I raised with my coaching peer was, although I was sitting at the leadership table, I didn't feel like I was always showing up. I wasn't always speaking up when I had something to say. So as we dissected that, my excuse would always be, well, I was really taught to not overtalk others, to allow everyone to finish what they were saying. As my as my coaching peer coached me through this, the reality was that an event that happened probably at that point about 25, 30 years prior was now showing up in a different way at the leadership table. And
Interesting.
yes, and what it was, I was bullied as a child. And I felt that as the years went by, I embraced it. And I would say I'm a seasoned adult at this point. But it was, well, this is how children behave. This is what they do. You just ignore them. Well, I didn't realize the total impact. And throughout my years going to college and so on and so forth, I thought I had really dealt with it. And just again, this is just how children are. What was happening was when I was bullied, I went inward. I focused inward and I was already shy. So I just didn't talk to individuals and I just retreated. That same experience was now happening at the leadership table. Not that
So
I felt like
interesting.
anybody was bullying me, but I was still going through that same experience just in a different way and did not realize that it linked back to that early experience as a child. So as I was coached through that, it helped me better understand that I need to push beyond that barrier
Mm,
and give myself voice at the table. And I began to show up differently, and my voice was being heard. And there wasn't, eventually, I got to the point that that negative experience was no longer causing physiological and emotional responses that I was having previously.
wow, that's amazing
Yes.
and super transformative, right? I mean, talk about the impact of coaching on, you as a leader and I mean, just that experience of going through that and understanding it is super powerful.
Yes. And that's why I like to share it, because of the transformation and the understanding that I had. And oftentimes when I am coaching young women, something in their past comes up and we work through that so
Mm,
that they can move beyond that barrier.
mm, yeah, fascinating. Oh, that's great.
Yes.
So you
And then,
said you had one more. I'm excited to hear what
yes.
this one is because they're so, yeah, these are fantastic.
Well, the final point, and this, I experienced this throughout my career. However, it became more important once I retire. And that is the ability to separate who you are from what you do
Mm,
and the role that you hold at work. So, as you mentioned, I've held some really impressive titles. However, for me to stay grounded and true to myself, I had to realize that my value was not in a positional title, and that was not who I truly was as an individual. And having the ability to decouple that so that I could then successfully transition into retirement. And part of that is truly understanding leadership is not about your title, it is truly about how you treat others, how you lead others, how you invest in them, and more importantly, how you respond in the quiet moments. Really, how I respond behind closed doors, how I'm treating individuals, how I am being responsive or not, and how I am impacting them. As I mentioned earlier, and I learned this when I was going through my MBA program, investing in others and leaving them better is truly, truly important when you show up as a leader. And just taking the time to meet people where they are and to make them feel valued. Again, if others are having, and all of us have had experiences throughout our lives and still impact us in some shape or form, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
But allowing people to know that they matter and that they value is truly important. And again, people may see, because I don't hold these big titles or I don't step into these big roles, that I am not as important. So the mere fact of being able to be grounded, remain true to yourself, and again, not allowing a title or role to define you, I have found to be very, very important to include in retirement. I have found some individuals in retirement as I'm coaching them that they feel that who they were was linked to the positions they had and the titles that they had, which
Mm-hmm.
made it very difficult to actually leave our agency as well as other organizations.
Yeah. Wow. Sharonda, that last point, I will tell you that's one of the reasons I wanted you to have a conversation with me about this, because I think when we worked together, you know, you were the director of talent at the agency, and I was the chief wellbeing officer. And I think that your understanding of that fine point of valuing individuals and truly caring about them and your role as a leader, like even you saying you leave them better than where they were before they engaged with you, those are core principles of supporting someone's well-being, which is, why we had such a strong partnership and relationship, and if you will, were successful in creating this incredible leadership ethos is what I would call it. But I
Yes.
think I just want to say that your compassion for other people is so evident in your leadership style that if we could help others develop that and understand that that's at the core underneath all of
Hmm.
these skills and competencies that we talk about on performance scorecards, I mean, at the core. And it's interesting that you said during quiet moments. I've
Yes.
often heard and think about who is a leader during crisis, but I think you're raising an exceptional point, which is who is a leader when that door is closed. And that's
Yes.
so internal to who you are as a leader. So, I just continue to learn from you.
Oh, thank you. Thank
This
you.
is,
And I will say I was focused on investing in others and making them better. Now, whether I was always successful, I don't know. Because
well,
they have to be receptive on the other end as well.
that's true. That's true. But
Yes.
understanding what your North Star is as a leader, not only the mission that we were doing, but as a leader, I think is what you're really underscoring. So,
Yes.
fantastic. So before we run out of time together, I would imagine that you've also had some female leaders that you've admired, that you've learned from. Anyone in particular that you want to share with us that we could maybe learn a little bit more about, and then why you might select them to be the person that you wanted to call out today, knowing that there's probably more than one.
There are many. And what I will start with, I have always, and for whatever reason, I'm not sure, but tended to focus on leaders that were around me. For example, yourself.
Mm.
And learning from their style, from how they engaged, and as well as how they treated their people. And I would say that truly allowed me to grow as a leader because it was someone that I could relate to in the organizational culture.
Mm.
I would say external to that. And what I would highlight is this was not always the case, would be Condoleezza Rice. So
Mm.
I was always impressed with her knowledge, her expertise, but I will be honest, the relatability, the engagement with others from my vantage point, not that I work closely with her, I had a difficult time really connecting with that. However, as I became more seasoned, and better understood people and the reality and the importance of meeting people where they are and suspending judgment, I truly began to realize um, that her leadership style was powerful yet quiet. And how she related to individuals in public was much different than how she related to individuals behind closed doors. So I would see the public facing piece, but also being aware that people show up in different ways because they may be an introvert. They There are others that are extreme extroverts. I am actually an introvert. However, I push myself to show up and many times try to at least try to cross the barrier so that I show up in a different way. Not everyone can do that, or they elect not to do that. And understanding that how people show up is really a factor, or another factor of how they show up is actually their own experience. And some introverts can't do that. And stepping back and looking at Condoleezza Rice from that vantage point gave me such a huge level of respect for what she has done, what she continues to do at Stanford, and the impact that she has had overall as it relates to national security.
Super insightful, specifically because you know in many ways leadership doesn't look the same for
Yes.
everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
not only to your point earlier on your own experiences, but also just your comfort level as well as
Exactly.
maybe your disposition. But it doesn't, and it goes back to, I think, something I've heard and I believe in as well in other conversations around this, which is you really need to be yourself.
Yes.
Because if you try to be someone else, your ability to be that impactful leader will be compromised because it's that
Absolutely.
genuineness that truly stems from you. So again, I think Condoleezza is a great example of a style, a leadership style that might not be as common or forward public facing, to your point, but the impact that she's had and the leadership that she's held in terms of being successful in her work is certainly really important to recognize. And I don't know, I think it's really neat and telling about you that, you're looking and you admire her as a leader because of that introverted nature, and maybe even it's helping you realize that you have more similarities with her because you openly shared that you're more of an introvert than an extrovert. So and look at all of the things both of you have done right in the national security space. So I think that's awesome. Sharonda, we could probably talk for hours here, right, as we have
Hmm.
over our careers. But I do want to just say thank you because I think, as someone who has worked in the field, the field, talent management, recruiting, et cetera, I think some of those, areas that you are providing guidance on can really not only impact an individual in terms of their career success, but also their personal success and
Yes.
fulfillment in life. And I think where you're at in your career, you call it seasoned, I call it wisdom. You're providing people with cliff notes on how to make sure that you navigate your career successfully, but also become the leader in your work life and personal life of who you want to be in this life.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for such a great conversation. It's truly meaningful, and wishing you a really good Women's History Month. Let's continue celebrating all those women in our lives that make a difference.
Thank you, Jennifer.